All right, the man that needs no introduction, friend of the podcast, legend in the skill acquisition community, and fellow Arizona native, Rob Gray. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thanks, Jav. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
It's good to see you. We were chatting earlier for 10 minutes, and we realized we probably need to hit play.
Yeah,
Talking about everything from the weather to
miss all the
just
good stuff on the
this
pre-show.
this all the pre-show stuff. We maybe should make a separate podcast
Yeah,
about the
I
pre-show
think
stuff.
release it for bonus content or something. Yeah.
That's right. Bonus
Yeah.
content. And we were just talking about what you're up to. I know so many of the people that everybody essentially that listens to this podcast is knows who you are, but what's been new in the past several months since we last talked?
Yeah, so I guess a few different things. So I'm with a new team in baseball. I've been working with the Chicago Cubs. As we say, partly it was kind of a practical thing for me because they train here in Arizona. So I can go to the training facility 20 minutes instead of having to fly to Florida, the team in it. So that's been going really, really well. I'm going to start my second year with them shortly. And like I said, I'm doing kind of a dual role as a skill acquisition specialist and a sports scientist, which is I really enjoy. So I've been doing that. And then my ASU stuff, lots of writing came together at once. I didn't plan it that way. The book with Sean and Tyler on football came out, and I have another one on tennis that's in the Constraint Set Approach series for Rutledge. And then my recent book, my in the Learn series, I'm calling it, just came out. So I've been doing that and some consulting things on the side. So keep busy.
Yeah.
As I said, my new book, I start with kind of lamenting that I get a lot of people reaching out to me in email and ask questions. I try to get to them, but sometimes when I get an issue that I see coming up regularly, that sounds like a good opportunity to write a book. So that's what I did.
Yeah, the audience is speaking, the demand is speaking, and we'll definitely get into your book. I'm curious. You've been doing this for a while now, and the demand for your services has increased, and the demand for modern approaches, ecological dynamics, CLA has increased.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that we are where you thought we would be several years ago, or do you think we are behind, more advanced? What's your thoughts on the current state of things?
Yeah, I think, like I said, sometimes I have a hard time judging this because I feel like I'm in a bit of an echo chamber. I think so. I think we're making a lot of good progress. I think there's still some kind of steps to take, but I'm seeing less technical instruction, more setting challenging practices, creating more game-like practices. So some basic stuff that I think is really, really positive trend in coaching, and definitely people interested in understanding this. And it's always exciting when, there's lots of young coaches that are really getting into this and understanding it at deep levels. So I think so overall. I don't know if I ever imagined that, a few people have contacted me. Someone contacted me, a faculty member I know, and they happened to go to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu casts with Greg Souders, and they heard him talk about affordances and they're like, what? I never thought I would ever hear this in a real world setting outside of a classroom. So that's good.
Yeah, it seems like it. It seems like it's getting more mainstream. Obviously, the combat community, our mutual friend Adam Singer, he was recently on, and him and Greg Souders, and obviously the CLA article that came out in the New York Times. So it seems like things are starting to turn.
I think
and,
so.
Become more mainstream.
Yeah, I think so. I think people are getting the basic messages without maybe the strict theory and we're trying to that this is trying to promote. I think are getting out there for sure.
What do you think is the thing that coaches hold on to the most? The sacred cow that they're unwilling to kill, if you will, that they're still holding on to?
The hardest thing I think that seems to be is I call it the fundamentals first, right? That you have to break the skill out of the game and teach you something about how to dribble a soccer ball, how to dribble a basketball, how to, basic movement solution first before they throw you in. That seems to be a hard thing to move off. Even though there's I think there's 5 or 6 studies that show it's really not necessary, and you get get more advantages if you kind of throw people in, kind of use a constraint-led approach early on. But yeah, that seems to be the biggest one. On the other end, extreme end, there's some resistance to, when you're working with very elite athletes, accepting very challenging practice is maybe they don't want to do it. I've seen some of the coaches I've worked with in other sports, different sports, they've said, that are a bit reluctant. They'd rather do the rote repetition stuff where they successful every time because it's just more rewarding and easier. So that I get that a little bit too. But the general kind of adapting is the as a coach, I think people are getting much better at designing practice. But what happens if this happens? What do I do next? How do I change? When do I abandon? That's the real art of it. And some people are exceptionally good at how do I tweak the dials, as we call them, to adjust the difficulty. Some people are exceptionally good at that, but I think some people are still struggling a bit.
Yeah, it's the what next,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You set a problem, you create an environment, and it doesn't work, or maybe it does,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
don't know how to progress it, or manipulate a constraint, if you will.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
And I've said, I think I talked about in my last book. I've been coaching my stepson in basketball and flag football, and it's really been, I haven't done it in a long time. It's really been it's the pull towards traditional coaching is very, very like when you set a practice activity and everything's going wrong and chaotic. You get parents making comments, putting everybody in layup lines or whatever. It makes everything control. This looks better and makes everyone happier. I always say though, one rewarding thing, it doesn't make the kids happier. The kids never complain about the practice activities we do because they're fun. That's what they came to do. So that's I always find that rewarding. But it's very having to apply it. I think I've learned so much from having to apply it in my consultancy role, but also as trying to put my hand back in coaching myself. It's not easy.
It's funny you said, youth basketball. Well, my nephew started last year. He never played basketball before. And my dad, he used to coach me in basketball. And so I went to the park with him one time, and my dad is kind of coaching him. And I'm trying not to be like a rude son, but my dad is like, do it like this, do it like this.
Yeah.
Dad, now, back off a little bit, but I'm watching my nephew, and he's just, I love my nephew, but he's so bad. It's like watching him just struggle.
Yeah.
And it's like I could see how the urge to like, no, you do it like this. I could see how that could be tempting.
Yeah. It was because we never do uncontested shots, layups ever. Like, so in a warm up before the game, I have layup lines, but the other person is defending. I start them further back or a different angle, but so it looks kind of ugly because our team's is missing lots of shots in the warm up, and everyone's like, "What's going on?" I think it helps. And the other thing is we had no set plays at all for our basketball team, which people found a little bit weird. But we had we had things we were looking for, and kind of principles we were coaching around. But I never had a play in my like you go here, you go there. We'll shoot this shot. So that was fun trying to put some of these things in action.
Yeah, definitely. Probably makes you a better coach having to relate those ideas to.
I think so. And understanding the theory and applying it, understanding I think there's a lot of constraints on the coach, right? That we have to accept, and all our practical realities. It's one thing to say in a book you need this high level of variability, but in a practical, like in my sport, hitting a baseball batter, hitting off a pitcher is of course ideal, right? But I can't say that that's the only batting practice we could do. That's completely impractical. No team would go for that. There's so many practical hurdles to that. Can we do more of that? Sure. So we got to kind of accept the practical constraints on the coaches.
Yeah,
that's important to understand.
Yeah, I'd love to actually talk to more about that. So just in general, like for coaches that deal with similar, practical constraints, whether it be load or whether it be difficulty from other coaches or other factors, what would you recommend for people that are maybe in a similar situation that you've had as far as having to deal with the realities of a professional organization or any other organization?
Yeah, I think I think I've been lucky. I have people at the top that have similar views of challenging practice, and so that's been it's been a lot easier because of that. But I always I always kind of start with how can we make this more challenging, more like game like. So that's where I go. If you want to stick to you really want to use batting tees, right? These people, I always keep in my mind and respect the fact that these guys are coaching a major league team. They must have done something right to get to that level. So I would never completely throw away or dismiss what they're doing. But can we do different heights or different things? And if we're going to do something really decontextualized, can we move on from it quickly? right?
Mhm.
Maybe let's do 2 minutes of that and then get to something more challenging, so making compromise like that is what I try to do. Maybe too far sometimes, maybe I should just say no. Sometimes you got to say that's complete. I think that's complete waste of time. I think you also got to be a little sensitive and with expression, a lot of us use meet people halfway, people where they are.
Yeah, I think that's important because I mean, I don't know how you would get change if you had the same message for every person. If you
Yeah,
want people to be adaptable, it's just going to be really hard to just say, "Hey, you all, everything you've been doing sucks for the
yeah,
last 20 years." You know
yeah.
what I mean?
Light
So
those
I
on
think
fire. Yeah, yeah. Those teas on fire. Well, let's make a bonfire out of them. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and it's so ingrained, like we were talking off air about, like this is what people have learned their whole life. I
Mm-hmm.
see parents of kids who parents have a certain idea how training should look like, even though they don't have any background in it. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to just have a blanket message for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like I say, this is such a dominant idea. It's treated as fact. Like every type of way we learn, whether it's a pottery class, cooking class, is always based on this assumption of the instructor has the answer. They're going to give you the one way to do it, and you're going to repeat it until you do it right. It's become a fact, right, of life.
Hmm.
We don't really question it anymore. So challenging that is a little weird. I was just with the police working on firearms training, right? Firearms is it's like basketball, 80% in practice and go down to 30% in the game. Okay, well, isn't that an indication that something's missing in practice? So, but we can't just let people, without giving them any kind of instruction at all. So yeah, it's an interesting task to pull people off
Yeah,
these ideas. They're well ingrained.
they are well ingrained.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that you've done, obviously, is your book series. I think has helped people. Obviously, if the first one, How We Learn to Move, and now you're on. Is this the fourth in the series?
I guess so. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. If you call it, yep. I think so. So that How We Learn to Move, learning to optimize movement. I can look behind me.
Yeah, I
The
have
ecological
back here.
coach man, and then this one's. I'm running out of title ideas, so
Yeah.
I just call this the advanced ecological approach. Kind of bringing together. It's kind of a mix of things that I think people aren't quite getting when I go out and consulting and applying, like representative design, constraints that approach. And then I wanted to introduce some newer, more advanced. I call it grad course in ecological. Yeah, everyone, the other stuff is, ecological dynamics 101. I was trying to get more, and that's kind of it's rewarding for me because it makes me read. Also, I've been trying to introduce the characters and like Bernstein, Gibson.
Hmm.
So I wanted to give Michael Turvey a really good focus on this. So he focusing on his work on inertia tensor and dynamic touch information. I had to read all that stuff again. It was really good to look at it.
And you've been doing the journal clubs with about Turvey as well.
Yes. Yeah. We've been working through the book. This book, lectures on perception, which has been hard. I think I keep saying people are enjoying seeing us struggle through it because it's a book written based on lectures he gave. He didn't write it as a book first, so the structure is it's almost like a stream of consciousness in a way.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. But anyone interested, we're finally getting into the ecological approach next time. We've been setting up all the background of the previous approaches. Now we're finally getting into Gibson, what Gibson tried to do in his big accomplishments. So it'll be fun.
Yeah,
Get to
that's
talk
some of
about that. Yeah,
the exciting
that's what we
stuff.
came here to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so with this book, why do you think this book was needed? What inspired you to write the fourth installment of this book series?
Yeah, I guess, well, like I said, I get a lot of good feedback. I get a lot of people. I think I have a unique vantage point of application and research, and hopefully I help convey. I'm good at getting people to understand complicated ideas. I think that's part of my role in this. And so, I was getting a lot, like I get a lot of, in the first chapter, I apologize. I say it's quintessentially Canadian because I start off by saying I'm sorry. That sometimes I get a lot of emails some really long ones about, I've tried this, I want to do this in my sport, and I try to get to them, but sometimes I see, when I see kind of common issues come up, I say, oh, that's a book chapter. Check. So that's kind of where it came from, and then it just takes its own life. I already got an idea for another one already. Yeah. So I kind of, part of it's some of them are mine, some of them are things that I want to do and think about. Yeah, this one was a mix of kind of things I'd been seeing and people talking about that I wanted to kind of address.
So, what were some of those things that you saw come up consistently?
So I have a chapter on the constraints-led approach. I talk about this problem I keep seeing. I call it when a constraint is no longer a constraint. So I see a lot of people creating very challenging practice activities, whether it's in baseball, hitting with a short bat or whatever. They create these really great challenging environments that address a specific problem of the person they're working with, which is great. That's what you're supposed to do. But the problem is I don't see any progression from there. So by the time I get to observing the practice, the person is using that constraint. They're crushing the ball 10 times in a row. Fundamentally, for me, a constraint is supposed to make it move you away from your current movement solution towards it. And if you can perform a task, you basically, put it simply, you've already solved the problem the coach has given you, right? So why we keep giving you the same problem over and over? It's not going to motivate you to change anything about it. If you want to use it as a refresher every once in a while, a person's struggling or whatever, then, but doing that same thing every day, what can we advance? How can we advance? How can we build on what we've done? How can we tweak the constraint, make it more difficult, maybe add a completely different one? So that's one of the main ones I wanted to address, how we go about that.
Now, and then obviously with the book title, it talks about skill development and maintenance. So is
Yeah.
that where the maintenance aspect differs from the skill development aspect, or what's the distinction for you in that?
Yeah, I wanted to get more into, this is kind of some of my experiences working with really elite athletes. One of the challenges sometimes we face is I'm in spring training. I have a whole bunch of younger players, and we're doing really challenging, great stuff in the batting cage. And then the major leaguers walk over on the other side, and they're doing really easy. and I'm like, don't look at them. they're doing a different thing. So trying to get understanding, where, depending on where you are, where you are relative to a game, the different goals of practice. So talking a little bit about that and what should be and recalibration issues like that. So trying to give them a little more for elite athletes. What should we be doing in practice? The answer is probably not surprising. Some of the same stuff, right? I don't think we should be doing the same rote repetition of a skill either at that level as well. Maybe just a different focus. So yeah, that was kind of one. And then other one I wanted to kind of put out some opinions I have about representative design, right? I think I contributed to this a little bit. I see a lot of people talking about how is my practice activity representative enough, or how representative. I think it can be a little bit wrong way to look at it. I think it's more of a binary thing. I think it depends on what you're trying to work on, right? I think when we talk about representative enough, I think we confound specificity with representativeness, right? You don't always want to go exactly like the competition. If we want to move away from competition sometimes to get problems that we think are going to help with a specific issue. And so I talk a little bit about that and some of the issues and in that area. Yeah, those are a couple of the big ones. I get into a little bit how people are using. I kind of get frustrated sometimes with how people are using performance analytics and data like that, especially now we're getting biomechanics, like biomechanics coming into basketball now with Hawkeye. Kind of people are really, I call it the absolute approach. So they're kind of saying, when you shoot a 3-pointer, your maximum shoulder rotation is 75%, 75 degrees. You're in the 25th percentile. Okay, we got to train to get you. Like it's a ideal solution with numbers, right?
Right.
So I kind of show that. I kind of try to illustrate what more important for me. What happens to your shoulder rotation when you get tired or in the fourth quarter? I want to see your relative change. For you specifically, I don't really care about the absolute numbers so much. But what do you do when you get tired? Or do you have an effective way of adapting your shot? Is it a healthy way? There's a lot of, I present there's some great work on baseball pitching that shows when pitchers get fatigued, right? They maintain their performance by playing a bigger role of the smaller muscles. So instead of having your delt and your pec be the main driver, you get your bicep and your triceps, which is dangerous, right? That's what could lead to injuries. Getting some of these ideas out, I'm seeing.
Sorry, go ahead.
So kind of pulling these things together so it's a kind of mix of research things, and I tried to stay away from the two camps of skill acquisition book. I didn't go into that. I'm getting a little tired of that. Or I think we don't. I don't know if we need. I'd rather focus on really digging into ecological dynamics and understanding, explaining it. That's what gives me happiness in doing, instead of constantly fighting a battle over whether which is right or wrong. I don't. Yeah, whatever. So yeah.
Well, you fought the battles, certainly,
Yeah.
recorded battles and some
Yeah.
private ones.
Yeah. So I've tried, but yeah, it's I'm kind of, I don't think the discussion is, they're not very fruitful anymore. They get kind of heated for the wrong reasons and stuff. So I just kind of let it be.
Yeah, it's almost like instead of arguing why the other approach is wrong, like, hey, let me show you a little bit more about how we think and how we're applying
Mm-hmm.
these ideas. See if this makes sense to you, which I
Mm-hmm.
think inherently it does to me anyway. So it's like
Yeah.
maybe that's a better way at this point, or at least a less frustrating way
Uh,
for you. So
yeah. I said, I can't tell you. I not make people think I probably make this up, but I can't tell you how many coaches or instructors I've had to come and say, I've done something similar to that and it worked great. Now I kind of understand why, and I understand how I can build on it. That's why so many people, I think, are excited by this approach, because it kind of resonates with what a lot of good coaches do already. I think I keep saying, when it's not new, then the methods aren't new. It's just that the theoretical framework is relatively new.
right, it's
Yeah.
the framework is becoming more applied, or at least understanding
Yeah.
why this might be effective. You said something about comparing specificity versus representativeness. What is it that people typically get mixed up between the two that you've seen?
I think I think they always think higher specificity is better. So wrestling, doing a MMA fight on the exact same size area you're going to do in competition, right? That's specificity, specific to competition. Hitting with the same, throwing the same baseball that's the same weight and size as you are in a game, right? That's specificity. What I say is sometimes we want to deliberately move away from there, and putting people in a small, right, had small area to fight has lots of things. It's going to create a lot of different affordances. It's going to encourage different things. So sometimes moving away from what the competition looks like, it can be very advantageous. And like in the book, I say I don't really care as long as the problem has the basic components coupled the information. I don't really care that how much it looks like the real thing. Right? It's a movement. Giving people movement problems, I think, is valuable in and of itself, as long as it's similar dynamically in the information on the basis as their actual.
Yeah, that's actually, you make up a good point, because at some point, if it's so specific, you're just kind of playing the game at some point,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're going to do exactly the same thing, and then how do you expect new things to emerge? You're not constraining to afford at that point, just kind of playing the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah. And then I think that's why coaches a lot of times get hung up on they're not going to get enough touches or reps or whatever in these small site. Well, yes, they will. If you design a small sided game, there's only 3 players on the team, they're going to get a lot of touches, right? That's why we don't play 11 on 11 when we want to work on, specifically on passing and what to start with young players. So, I think that's, you're right. That's you need, and using the principle of overload it's one of the most fundamental of how you get stronger and better, is you overload whatever, perceptually, physically. So if we can't go away from the game, we can never use that. And underload has advantages too, but we could never, if we can't use a different ball than use in the game, how can we overload your? So I think that's important to think about.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I see this all the time, where we maybe you work with a coach and they'll design a great activity or a problem for their athletes, but then the athletes don't get enough goes, and so that's
Yeah.
also a part. Like Tyler will say that all the time, and so it's really difficult to have somebody advance their skill when it's, and also with youth athletes, as you work with youth athletes, when they're just, half of them are sitting around looking, kicking the grass, picking their nose. So designing something where kids or athletes are getting enough opportunities, I think, is super important.
Yeah, and I try to make a big kind of point in the new book about educating intent, right? But like a lot of times I see practice activities where I don't know what's a good rep count. Like if you're doing a football drill, do they have to score a touchdown? If they don't, do they get 10 yards? Is that a good rep? I think the coach and the athlete need to be clear on what is the goal? What am I trying to achieve here? Right. And I think, people like, we talk about Greg Satter's good at where you change the goal to match kind of the thing you're trying to coach, rather than the goal being to submit someone, which takes a million steps and is very difficult. Your goal is to stay on top of this person and not let them get up. Right? If you do that, you win. That's a good rep, right? So he's got to be very clear about that, I think. And you're right. And if you don't do that, I think people get a lot of wasted reps. So they don't, they're not getting anything out of it.
And yeah, I think that's a great point. That's one of the things when I first became familiar with Greg's work, and I haven't taken his class, which I need to at some point, but I've seen him coach, and a lot of it is just setting like a clear intention. I think that's such a huge part of it. It's like, okay, your job as the bottom player is to get your feet on the top player. If you do it, the game ends. You know what I mean? It's very clear, and he's not telling you how to do it. But I've made that mistake where you set up something, and then the athletes, you think they understand what the intent of the activity or the game is, but they don't. So I think that's one of his things that he does exceptionally well, is being very clear with like what the expectations of each person.
Defining, like, what does it mean to pin someone? What exactly do you mean? So and I have a chapter in the book too. I wanted to kind of take, a lot of people are talking about coaching to invariants and attractors and stuff, and I want to kind of clarify how I think about that and how I think it should be done. I think it's a good concept. I think there's some confusion about it. Some people are basically taking the concept of invariance and kind of that's the ideal technique. You have to, I keep police examples. In order to shoot a gun, you have to hold your arm straight, lean slightly forward. No, you don't. They don't. As long as the gun is pointing at the target, then you could do whatever you want. That's the invariant. Understanding what those are, and I think coaching, I try to bring that in relationship between invariants and attractors. I think there's some misunderstandings there, but yeah, I think you're right. Defining things, I think, is really important.
Yeah, so that as instantly I thought that. Would you recommend as a coach, if you're working with a sport that you haven't, like, you work with all kinds of sports. I know your baseball is your main one, but you consult with probably every sport out there. Is part of that is understanding, maybe if you're unfamiliar with the sport, the invariance of the sport. Is that helpful? Is like almost writing that down?
I think so. Understanding what causes, what do we need to do to achieve, to be successful. That's what a variant to me is a task. It's an element of the task that is required for success, right? Whether it's effective transfer of force or being properly aligned with them. So I think it helps to define. I see a lot of that. I see a lot of teams. Like, I work in a lot of ice hockey now too, and where they're not kind of defining, it's not specific enough for me, right? So a hockey team will struggle on their power play, right? They're not getting enough. So they'll just practice in the practice. They'll just run the power play over and over and over again, which is better than doing some isolated drill. But can we adapt? Why don't you score in the power play? Do you not get enough screens on the shots? Do you not move the puck across the ice quickly enough? Like, what do you want them to work on? Right? What are we going to? And that's when you can put constraints in. You can change the number of players, the size, how you feed the puck, all these different things. So that's one of the things I was trying to kind of encourage, defining. But I think thinking about what actually, I think a lot of for me, it was in basketball, the how you do a layup, the traditional way, jump off this foot. If you ask why did we do that? Why do we tell kids to do that? Like, stop for a second and think. It kind of challenges, is this really matter or not? And then any time, like, the really powerful thing I love to see is when kids figure it out on their own. Like, if you have someone constantly defending a person, they'll realize, I have to shoot, I have to keep the ball protected, right? They'll figure that out on their own. Instead of you telling them, it's just way more powerful, I think. Yeah.
And what's always funny to me about that too is, like, take a layup. Some of the most skilled athletes don't do layups the way, like, Kyrie Irving is the one who, all these different ways he can finish at the rim, and it doesn't look like anything that we were taught. It doesn't look like anything when someone's learning how to do a layup.
Yeah. That's kind of the fun. One of the frustrations, I think, with the fundamentals first is when you look in the game, the fundamental that you taught them rarely show up, if ever, right? The basic perfect layup, people do lots of variants of it. And, that's what I try to, again, let's finish on the opposite side of the hoop. Let's, whatever way you want. Yeah. And people like Alex Rama are great at, designing practice drills to let people be creative and adaptive. And so, I think that's a great example.
Yeah. And I think that's where, and I have this question that I thought about. So, the idea of exploration, allowing your athletes to explore, and I received a question from somebody actually, so I'm going to pass it on to you. But
Okay.
is there a time when, I think I have an idea of what you might say, but when exploration is not the move, right? When you wouldn't want an athlete to explore these different ways you're going to lay the ball in the basket, is there a time where you want to move away from that?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's all, I think, mostly we're talking about when you're for younger athletes, we want them to really broadly explore, different ways to live. I think once you get more and more developed, we want to get into the, we'll call it exploitation phase where you can kind of find out different ways to do that same. You found an effective movement solution. What are different ways you can kind of tweak it for the constraints? So yeah, I think it depends on the skill level. I think there's kind of finding a solution, then kind of fine tuning it and getting it and controlling it. So I think there's kind of those two stages, and Audis and all those periodization model. They kind of divide those stages up. So yeah, I think there's a time for the really, really broad exploration activities like doing the wrong way. My example of hitting the goal, I would never do that with an elite golfer, right? Having them hit way to the left and way to the right. Maybe if they're struggling or something, doing it in one activity, but that kind of broad exploration of the movement solution space, I think is mostly for kind of starting out earlier on. And then we still want to kind of get some variability and different constraints, but when you get more skilled, we're really more focused, right? We can bring in, you're obviously skilled when you're skilled basketball. Where are you missing the shots? What shots are you missing? What are you struggling with? Can we focus around there more specifically?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
like a new hitter, I want them to explore different ways to swing so they can make contact with the ball. The lead hitter, I'm like, how can we make you so you're more effective hitting high fastballs? Right? One very specific condition.
So with that exploration approach, are you essentially trying to expand someone's solution space? Are you trying to have them attune to certain information that might be okay? This feels a little bit weird. This feels off. So this is not near the swing that I want to actually deliver. Like, what is the thought process behind that early exploration?
Yeah, it's a couple things. So yeah, one is getting them to mainly I want them to learn, not kind of consciously or explicitly, the relationship between how I move and the outcome. That's why I think I've said in my that baseball paper, it was inspired actually by golf. Getting people to hit ball way to the right. If I'm pointing left, but you understand what it takes to make the ball go right. It's very useful, right? Even though that's not what you want to achieve in the end, you understand how my movement causes this outcome. Now make the left. My joke is hit it the way to the right, hit it right way to the left, and I say don't do either of those things, and it will go straight. Obviously, that's not exactly, but that's the basic idea. So understanding the relationship, getting to realize there's lots of different ways to do it. We can pull out things when we need them. I see some, like we're talking about the ingrained approach. I had the stepson had to go for flag football. I had to go to concussion, this video talking about concussions. And I attempted to write to people because one of the things they were proposing in the video was that concussions happen when people try to do the wrong technique. When you try to do a super creative shot in basketball, that's when you're going to get hurt. Instead of doing the wrong message for because the guy in the video, there was this portraying this character in the high school video, and yeah, he was messing around on the basketball court and he fell and that's when he got the concussion. So one of the problems was he wasn't doing the jump shot the proper way, or that's what so super frustrating. But yeah. So, but yeah, I think there's so much value in kind of taking the lead, especially for kids, because that's fun too, and I find it takes the pressure off a little bit. Hitting a ball straight or putting a ball right in the basket is like high pressure versus put it off the back of the rim and make it come back to you, which requires equal amount of skill and precision, but it just kind of doesn't seem as big a deal if you don't do it successfully. So yeah, I kind of like that.
What's funny to me too about claims like that is like it's not based off of anything like it grounded in reality. So I hear these things in coaching and I'm like, why is the burden on me or to tell you why this makes sense? You haven't explained why this makes sense in any way other than just your belief that it makes sense.
Yeah, that's the frustration I have a lot is the burden of proof always seems to be on the ecological dynamics. Where's the proof that shows that how many reps and adjusting things this way actually works. Show me the paper. It's just based on kind of people doing it over and over for so long, which is, Alex does a great job in his books, survivorship bias, path. There's, for every kid that was a super success doing it this way, there's hundreds of literally kids that dropped out because they did the same thing and they weren't successful. So I'm always hesitant about taking examples from elite as your star player, and Michael Jordan did a million of the same shots, and so did a lot of other people, and they weren't Michael Jordan, right? It is very frustrating that this kind of unfair burden of proof. I agree.
I've kind of when I hear the elite athlete comparison, I've gone so far in the other way as like those are outliers, right? So don't use them as examples, because that's what people typically do. We're going to base how to move off of Michael Jordan or whoever, Carlo, whatever person you can name. Usain Bolt, like those people, those athletes are outliers, and they're not who we should be basing how we instruct kids or developing athletes. It's almost, I'm not saying that Michael Jordan could have done anything and been successful, but did he succeed in spite of, because of? Like, we don't know how any of these athletes necessarily were successful. Or was it all to pick up basketball he played with his brother and or was it his trainer? No one knows this. So it's a fool's errand to me.
Yeah, and he did lots of reps in baseball too. Yes, that didn't seem to work very well. But I think one of the things, I think also we kind of, people see what they want to see in those practice. I have in my new book, I talk about, people have gone back and looked at John Wooden, UCLA coach. One of his famous lines is I can't remember, the 8 principles of learning or imitation, demonstration, then 5 repetitions in a row. But the people have reevaluated his coaching. He has statements like, I gave him the principles. I was looking for them I was hoping to be as surprised as the play they came up with as the other team. So he was coaching adaptability and dexterity. I think you just kind of get the misrepresentation sometimes of what those players do. Yes, probably they took a lot of the same shot. So does Steph Curry, but he also shoots from the hall of the entranceway to the court, and lots of crazy, plays volleyball with the ball. I've seen him do lots of crazy things. So I think we've got to be careful with those examples. I agree.
That's something that really grinds my gears.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I had about the book with this concept of advanced ecological approach, just to be clear, this is for all demographics. So you can be a youth athlete and you can use these advanced methods. You can be an advanced athlete. You can use these methods. When it comes to scaling, is that something that you feel like coaches have understood well when it comes to scaling information? Is that something that people still struggle with? That's something that I've seen a lot lately, where we think of either it has to be super complex or it has to be misrepresented completely. What are your thoughts on how we're doing as an industry with this concept of scaling?
Yeah. So first of all, I'd say the advanced, I was thinking more of the reader, right? So you probably won't want to jump in here if you don't know anything about ecological approach. That might be a bit overwhelming. But I don't think I agree. I don't think people quite get have the power of it. It's how easy it is to kind of tweak certain things to get the difficulty level right. I see that's when people go back to being over technical coaching or separating, decoupling perception action, instead of, can we make less variability? Can we use a bigger ball? Whatever. There's so many different ways you can scale. So I don't think overall we exploit that enough in what we're doing. And then it's a powerful way to individualize. You can easily say you do this. I definitely think we can make more advances there.
What do you think is something that is underutilized with scaling? Like, a lot of people will maybe change space. They'll maybe add opponents for manipulating constraints. What do you think is something that is underutilized that coaches maybe don't do enough of?
I think I really like constraining the opponent. So I mentioned my start with a basketball unopposed. I can make rules about how you're allowed to defend. I could start you. So I do breakaway layups and start people at different distances behind the person, different angles, different. So I'm basically making it hard. easier, depending on how good the player is. I can make it really hard for them to get their shot off, or very easy by putting the player way back. So those kind of things, constraining the opponent, I think is one that I like to use a lot. That's one of the biggest ones, I think. I think people are getting the idea about constraining, like, the size of the playing area, the number of opponents, or things like that. But yeah. So I think, but there's lots of different ways, constraining, changing the outcome, like we mentioned, like Greg does. So if you have a beginner, don't give them the outcome of submitting someone. That's way too hard. Give them the outcome, progressive outcomes, staying on top of someone, getting your hands around one of their arms locked in, and progress, build the outcomes like that.
Yeah, which is to your point, that's like the opposite of what most people do. Like I remember doing jujitsu classes, and it's like, okay, you're going to do A, B, C, D, and then you end up in this submission. It's like I don't even know how to get past A, and it's also
Yeah.
very linear too, right? It's like look for
Yeah.
this and look for this and look for that. So it's such a big leap, which was always my challenge, because then you get it and you try it, and it's like it's overwhelming.
Yeah, and a few people, I think I don't know who came up with this term first, but I call them dead to alive practice activities, right? So if as a coach you have a team struggling playing pick and rolls in basketball, well, make everybody go in a certain way into the pick and roll, which is dead because there's no decisions, it's scripted. Then after that, let it go. They can finish the play any way they want. And the same with with jiu-jitsu. That's what you start in a certain, you're on top of the person or you're behind them, and then go live from there. So I think there's that's an underutilized thing you can do too.
Yeah, I like both of those that you said.
But again, you're letting people find their own solution after you force them into this kind of point you want to practice a lot. That's how you get the reps, right, of like a pick and roll or something without over scripting it.
Mm-hmm. You allow them to solve it how they solve
Yeah.
it. So I'm curious to know, what are your thoughts on the future? Like, what is the future of coaching? What's the future of this approach? You have been writing diligently for the past several years and doing everything you can to make this more relatable and more accessible. Well, what does the future look like for you?
I hope that it's still, we still can continue to grow. I see it in certain sports and certain domains, really getting some traction. I think we have to there's a little bit of quality control necessary, so people I mentioned, latching on to and not really doing it. I think that we need to kind of watch for that. So I hope it continues to grow. I hope it will continue to get, like we mentioned, the New York Times article and stuff, people coming up with more and more creative ways. I hope there's more and more kind of coaching groups within a specific. I think those are really useful, where you have a group that you can talk about what you're doing and what you're trying, what's working, what's not. So I hope that keeps going. And yeah, I guess I don't know. I hope this isn't just a fad.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. I think if we can I think there's so many positive things about it that I hope it continues to grow and expand. Certainly, we have kind of like minor steps when like Alex in basketball, when you get a bit of a splash and then everyone gets excited for a little bit. Well, not everyone. Some teams get excited. Yeah, everyone is way over selling it. But I hope, in other sports too, will continue. And I think so. Hopefully get more kind of material and content based on specific. I get a lot of people asking about, for learning to play music or in business or applying these, I do think, these ideas apply everywhere. I think that one of the things I mentioned in the book is ecological dynamics is a theory of everything, right? It's of animals, of nature, right? It's not a special human-centered theory. It applies to everything, right? The same kind of dynamics that predict when someone's going to get injured can be used to predict a stock market crash or a power outage, and so it's all the same kind of principles. So I hope that continues to expand like that.
Yeah, I think for me, I would love to see it, and this is I talked with Justin Ferguson of the Minnesota United, but a unifying ecological dynamics as like a unifying approach where everybody's speaking similar language, you know what I mean? Because then it erases so many of the misunderstandings, or at least when you have a common language, a common vernacular, a common endpoint, I think that would be ideal. Hopefully we can get there. And, we can start in your own organization, at your gym, whatever it may be, but that would be, I think, a good future.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a culture. I think, Adam Singer's good at talking about that, and Scott, you're right, how you need to kind of create the culture of exploring, failing, but I think you're right. Also getting getting coaches using the term constraints and affordances, I found very, very powerful, because then they think about, why am I adding this? What is it? what it's supposed to achieve. So yeah, I hope so. I hope it continues to grow and coaches' understanding of it as well.
Well, you're certainly doing your part with the book. And, I think obviously everybody who listens to this, go and pick up the book. What is the best way for them to find it?
So probably just go to, I have my website, perceptionaction.com. There's a books tab and it's on Amazon. If you want to find it there directly, that's where you find everything about me and everything going on.
Well, we'll link to that in the show notes, and everybody listening, make sure you check out the new book, and then we'll bookmark a appearance for Rob on number 5, whatever that book title is.
Yeah. I think the first one, you asked me if I'd ever write another one. I was like, I don't know. After I did the interview, I doubt it. But now I'm fully admitting that everything works out. There'll be another one.
You're a serial author now.
I know. I'm out of control. Just like I went for podcasting like that for a while now. Yeah. No, I enjoyed it, like I said, and I get great feedback from people. It's very rewarding. Everyone that's done that, I'm sure like a podcast, how powerful it is when you get a positive, like how much gas it puts in your tank. When someone says, you really helped me or whatever, some of them are, so I really appreciate that one.
Yeah. Just to attest to that, the podcasting thing, doing it as long as you have. I haven't done it as long as you have, but you don't want to edit sometimes. You don't want to schedule. You don't want to get on the microphone. You're tired. You're sleep deprived. So I definitely think hearing that puts some wind in your sails. So
for sure, it's cool. Very, very powerful. I always think reach out and, if you have another podcast or something you really love, reach out and say, hey. Yeah, sometimes I get emails when they're not asking any questions. I just want to tell you I really enjoy your material. And I'm like, wow, okay, that was easy. I really appreciate that. So it's very rewarding. As I said, it helps me. It motivates me to keep up with the research and everything too. So I'll keep going. We'll see what happens next one.
Well, we're looking forward to it. Obviously, everybody here is going to check out that book. I need to still get it, so I will add that to my. It's like what's happened is my Amazon cart just keeps going and going, I know. And going, and I'm like, man, I got to get this and I got to get this, but I will. I'll make yours a priority. Yeah. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for your continued work. It's inspiring for people who are trying to make an impact and continue to blaze that trail. We appreciate you.
My pleasure. Anytime, Hop.